The morning after I buried my mother, my husband set 2 suitcases by the front door and told me he needed to find himself. I was 39. My eyes were still swollen from the funeral. Down the hall, our daughter slept with her thumb in her mouth, 4 years old, dreaming about nothing that would ever hurt her. Not yet. Gerald Marsh looked at me the way you look at a coat you've decided no longer fits. Calm, a little bored, already gone. "I'll send money when I can," he said. He did not mean it. "You'll be fine, Ruth. You're always fine." I remember the sound of the second zipper. I remember the cold sliding in under the storm door. And I remember what sat on the kitchen table between us, next to a casserole a neighbor had left. My mother's old wristwatch. A scratched Timex with a cracked crystal. The only thing I'd asked to keep of her. I had wound it that morning out of habit. In the silence, it ticked like it was counting something down. He stepped over the threshold. He didn't look back. And I stood there in a house that smelled of lilies and cold coffee, holding a dish towel. And I made myself a promise I did not yet know how to keep. I didn't cry. Not then. That part came later. What came first was the arithmetic. My name is Ruth Delaney. I took my mother's name back the year the divorce was final. The way you take back a coat someone borrowed and ruined. I'm 51 now. I live in Reading, Pennsylvania, where the old textile mills still stand along the river like patient animals waiting to be useful again. I know something about that. What I'm going to tell you happened across 12 years. The 12 years between the morning that man walked out of my door and the afternoon he walked into my conference room, hat in his hands, needing the one thing on earth only I could give him. Welcome to her silent triumph. Get comfortable. Every woman in these stories was underestimated by someone who should have known better. Hit that like button and tell me where you're watching from. Here's the thing about being told you'll always be fine. People say it so they don't have to be the ones to help you. They say it and they feel absolved. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the woman they said it to decides to make it true. On her own terms, on her own clock. Mine was already ticking. Before all of it, I had a small, ordinary, good life. And I didn't know how good it was until it was gone. We rented the downstairs of a duplex on Mulberry Street, the kind with radiators that knocked all winter, like something trying to get in. Gerald had big plans and a nicer smile. And back then, I believed those were the same thing. He wanted to build a menswear label. Real coats. Honest coats, he'd say, sketching lapels on diner napkins while his eggs went cold. I was the one who actually knew how to sew. I'd learned it at my mother's kitchen table, her cracked Timex on her wrist, her foot steady on the pedal of a single older than both of us. She made wedding gowns for half the county on that machine. She had rules, and she said them like scripture. Measure twice, Ruthie. Cut once. The fabric doesn't lie. Then she'd look at me over her glasses. People do, but the fabric never will. I took in alterations to keep our lights on. Bridal gowns, work uniforms, a prom dress every spring for a girl whose mother couldn't afford new. I was good. Fast hands, a good eye. The kind of finishing that made a $40 jacket hang like a $400 one. Gerald would bring me his prototypes with the shoulders set wrong, and I'd fix them at midnight and never tell him they'd been wrong, so his pride stayed whole. That's a thing women are taught to do. Keep the seams invisible. Keep the man looking good.
Then Emma came. 4 pounds, 11 ounces, a month early, with a cry like a fire alarm in an empty building. I sewed her first blanket from the offcuts of a bride's train. My mother held her and cried and said, "This one's going to be steel, Ruth." That same year, my mother got sick. Pancreas. It moves fast, the cruel ones. For 11 months, I did all of it. Night shifts at her bedside, alterations by day, Emma on my hip, and Gerald at the studio more and more, until the studio was just a word that meant not here. I wound that watch every single morning of those 11 months. Winding it felt like keeping her heart going a little longer. The day we buried her, I stood at the grave with Emma's small hand swallowed in mine, and I thought, at least I still have my little family. At least I'm not alone. Hold on to that thought. Because that was the last hour I believed it. He'd been planning it for weeks. That's the part that still catches in my throat 12 years later. Not the leaving, but the planning. The suitcases weren't packed in grief. They were packed on schedule. He had rented an apartment across town back in September. My mother died in October. He waited until she was in the ground because, and these are his exact words, months later, under oath in a deposition, he didn't want to make a scene during a difficult time. As if the day after a funeral was the considerate choice. There was someone else, of course. There's always someone else. A boutique buyer named Vanessa who believed in his vision. He took the good industrial machines, the ones I paid for. He took the client list I had spent 9 years building, name by name. He took the $8,000 on our joint account, money I'd saved a 5 and a 10 in a coffee can before it ever saw a bank. And he left me the lease, the credit card balance in my name. I'll tell you the exact second my heart stopped. 2 weeks after he left, a letter came from a collections agency, a business line of credit I had never signed for. $11,200. He had forged my signature. Traced it, I think, because the R had the same little hook mine always had. My hands shook so hard the paper hissed. I called him. I had 100 things stacked up behind my teeth. I said exactly one of them. How could you do this the week I buried my mother? There was a pause, a little sigh. The sigh of a man being asked to carry something heavy. And Gerald Marsh, the man who sketched honest coats on diner napkins, said, "Ruth, don't be dramatic. It was just bad timing." Just bad timing. He hung up first. I stood in that kitchen a long time. Emma was napping. The radiator knocked. And on the table, my mother's watch ticked and ticked and ticked. The only thing left in that house still keeping a promise. I didn't know it yet, but that sound was a countdown starting. 12 years. It's a long time.
It is also, it turns out, exactly long enough. Here's what nobody tells you about betrayal. It isn't the leaving that breaks you. It's the arithmetic that comes after. $11,000 in forged debt, $600 in the bank, a 4-year-old who'd outgrown her shoes, rent due in 9 days. I sat at that kitchen table with a legal pad and did the math over and over again, as if the numbers might rearrange themselves into mercy. They didn't. Numbers don't lie either. So I sold what I could. The wedding china, $40. My own good sewing machine, $200. I kept exactly one thing that still had resale value. My mother's ancient singer. Some things you would starve before you sold. And that machine was the last warm hand I had left.
I took a night shift at a hospital linen service, folding sheets and surgical gowns still hot from the industrial dryers. $8.15 an hour. I'd fold from 11 to 7, sleep the 2 hours Emma allowed me, then take in alterations by day. I learned to sew on 3 hours of sleep. I learned a lot of things on 3 hours of sleep. I really did think that my family would catch me when I fell. They didn't. When I asked my father for a short loan just to keep the electric on, he gave me the sigh I'd been hearing my whole life. "A man doesn't just leave Ruth," he said. "You must have made him unhappy somehow. What did you do?" What did I do? My brother took Gerald's side outright because Gerald had once co-signed a loan on his truck. That Thanksgiving, they set a place at the table for Gerald's empty chair and set me in the kitchen to help. My own blood looked at a woman abandoned with a baby and a forged debt and decided the inconvenient thing in the room was the woman. So I stopped asking. I want you to understand that specific kind of cold. Not the cold of being hated, but the cold of being quietly filed under inconvenient by the people who were supposed to love you. The lowest night, Emma spiked a fever of 103, and I had $11, and the electric was already past due. I sat on the bathroom floor with her burning little body asleep against my chest, and I took my mother's watch out of my pocket and held it to my ear. Still ticking, cracked crystal and all. And I whispered her words into the dark. "The fabric doesn't lie." Then I added my own. "And neither will I. I won't become him. I'll just keep going, one honest stitch at a time." I put the watch back in my pocket. I didn't know it yet, but that was the night I stopped falling and started building.
What do 12 years look like? From the outside, they look like nothing. A woman going to work, a woman coming home. Nobody makes a documentary about the years a person spends simply not quitting. If you've been listening for a while, do me one quick favor. Subscribe. It costs you nothing and means everything. Let me show you those years from the inside, because that's where the whole story actually happened. The first year, I sewed. That's all. I sewed, and I survived, and I got Emma to kindergarten in shoes that fit. The second year, I sewed and I studied. At the library, after Emma was asleep, I taught myself the unglamorous engineering behind clothes. Pattern making, grading, the quiet math of how a garment scales from a size 4 to a size 18 without the seams betraying you. Betrayal was a thing I now understood at a molecular level. I was determined nothing I ever made would do it. The first real turn came from a woman named Gloria. Gloria ran the hospital linen service. Sharp eyes, orthopedic shoes, no patience for waste. One night she watched me rehem a stack of 100 surgical gowns. Gowns the outside contractor kept returning crooked while charging triple. And she stood there with her clipboard and said, "You shouldn't be folding my towels. You should be selling me the towels." I laughed. I hadn't laughed in a year. I came out rusty. "I'm serious," she said. "Bid the uniform contract. I'll make sure your envelope gets opened." So I did. I sat at that kitchen table and bid the mending and alterations contract for 2 regional hospitals, pricing my own labor at almost nothing. I won it. Gloria was my first ally. Remember her. She comes back.
That contract let me hire one woman. Her name was Marisol. Her husband had left her too. Then a second, Dawn, whose hands trembled until she sat at a machine and then went perfectly still. Then a third, a fourth, a floor of women, most of them like me, abandoned, overlooked, written off, with fast hands and nobody betting on them. I bet on them. It is the only investment I have never once regretted. We worked out of a leaking unit in the old hosiery mill on Canal Street. $40 a month, because the roof let the rain in and nobody else wanted it. We put buckets under the drips and kept sewing. On the good days, it sounded like rain on a tin roof and 30 machines running in time. And some mornings I'd stand in the doorway and feel something I hadn't felt since my mother died. Not happiness exactly. Purpose. The feeling of being necessary. But I won't pretend it was only good days. One February, the heater died 3 nights before a hospital order was due. No money to fix it, no room to be late. We sewed in our coats and fingerless gloves, with our breath hanging white in the air. My hands cracked open at the knuckles and bled onto the pale muslin, and I learned to keep a rag tucked in my apron so I wouldn't stain the work. I didn't stop. I couldn't. 60 women were counting on Friday's check, and so was a girl at home who needed winter boots. That's the part nobody tells you about climbing out of a hole. It costs you skin. Nobody hands you power in this world. You stitch it, 1 cold hour at a time, and some of those stitches have your own blood in them. I want you to notice something the man who left me never understood in his life. Gerald wanted a label, a name stitched into a collar. He wanted to be seen. I wanted a workshop, a machine that ran whether or not anyone knew my name. I wanted to be necessary.
Those 2 wants build completely different lives. His needed an audience. Mine just needed the lights to stay on. Guess which one survives a bad year? By year 7, we weren't mending anymore. We were manufacturing. Full contract sewing for small American brands who needed short, high-quality runs made right, made here, made on time. My whole reputation fit into one sentence buyers whispered to each other like a secret. Delaney will tell you the truth about your garment, and she'll deliver it perfect on the day she said. In an industry that runs on people lying about their margins, their timelines, their factories, honesty turned out to be the rarest luxury I could sell. So I sold it at a premium. And here is the thing I never advertised, the fact I kept as quiet as the watch in my desk drawer. By year 10, Keystone Stitchworks didn't only take contracts, we took equity. When a genuinely good young brand couldn't cover a production run, I would finance it,
The fabric, the labor, the whole run, in exchange for a piece of the company. Quietly, through a holding company with a name so boring nobody ever asked who was behind it. The founders kept their pride. I kept the ledger. I had become, without ever once saying the word out loud, an investor. The person in the room who decides which small clothing company lives and which one folds this quarter. 12 years after a man told me I'd always be fine, here is what fine looked like. I employed 62 people. I owned pieces of 9 brands. My name was on the lease of the entire mill now. Roof repaired, buckets long gone. And my mother's cracked Timex sat in a small velvet box on the corner of my desk, wound every single morning, still keeping perfect time. For long stretches, I forgot the man entirely. That's the truth nobody believes about surviving someone. Building something real leaves almost no room for the person who couldn't.
And then, on an ordinary Tuesday, with rain on the skylights and 30 machines running below me, a plain manila folder landed on my desk. A distressed menswear brand, seeking emergency financing and a manufacturing partner to save a make-or-break retail order. The brand was called Marsh and Vale. I recognized the name before I recognized what it did to my own pulse. Marsh and Vale. So he'd finally built it. The honest coats, the napkin sketches, the label with his name on the collar. 12 years, 1 boutique buyer, and a whole brand later. And according to the folder my analyst had assembled, it was drowning. Let me tell you what the numbers said. And numbers, unlike Gerald, don't lie. Marsh and Vale had landed the order of a lifetime. 1,100 wool top coats for a national department store chain. A $4.1 million account. The kind of order that makes a brand. Or, if you fumble it, buries one. But Gerald had done what Gerald always did. He'd overpromised to the buyer and underplanned everything behind it. The overseas factory he'd been quietly using had collapsed under him mid-production. Walked off with his deposit and left him with nothing but tech packs and a deadline. He now had 90 days to deliver 1,100 coats, cut and tailored to spec, or lose the account, lose the brand, and trigger the personal guarantee he'd signed against his own home. He needed 2 things, fast, and he needed them from the same narrow world. 1, a manufacturer who could execute a flawless domestic run of 1,100 tailored wool coats in 90 days. There were exactly 3 shops on the entire eastern seaboard that could do it at that quality, on that clock. Mine was the best of the 3. Everyone in the trade knew it. 2, an investor to bridge $900,000 in production costs he couldn't front, because his cash was gone, and no bank would touch him. And the boring named holding company his broker had spent 3 weeks quietly shopping that investment to, collecting polite no's everywhere else, also mine. I sat back in my chair. I'll be honest with you, because this whole channel is built on it, the first thing I felt was not triumph. It was a strange, wide, cold calm. The feeling of standing in the exact center of something that has been turning slowly toward you for a very long time. 12 years of winding a dead woman's watch. And the man who had stepped over my threshold and told me not to be dramatic was now, without the faintest idea, standing on mine. Both doors he needed to walk through, the factory and the money, opened from the same hand. His.
Mine. Then I made myself do the thing I trained a whole company to do. I stopped feeling, and I read the file like it belonged to a stranger. And here is the number that undid me. Quietly, alone, at my own desk. When Gerald left, the support he'd offered in the divorce, the number he wrote down and then never once paid, was $300 a month. $300 to walk away from a wife and a 4-year-old. The deal now sitting on my desk, the one with his name begging at the top of it, was worth $4.1 million. $300, $4.1 million. I let those two numbers sit side by side on the page for a long moment. I didn't gloat, I didn't smile. I just looked at them the way my mother taught me to look at a bolt of expensive cloth before the first cut. Carefully. Twice. Then I called my analyst in and told her we would take the meeting. And we would run it exactly the way we ran every other deal that came through that door. By the book, or not at all. I never wanted revenge. I wanted my life back. So I stopped waiting, and I went to work.
My analyst, Priya, didn't know a thing about my history. Nobody at Keystone did. To her, Martian Vale was just another distressed file with a tight clock. So when I told her to run full diligence, no shortcuts, no favors, no thumb on the scale in either direction, she just nodded and got to work. That was the entire point. If I so much as touched this file, every figure in it would have to survive daylight. So we pulled Martian Vale apart the way we pulled every prospect apart. And the more we pulled, the clearer the picture got. And the strangest thing happened. The picture stopped being about me at all. Because Gerald hadn't only done it to me. There were 2 former business partners he'd squeezed out, one of whom now drove a delivery route. There was a fabric supplier up in Ohio he'd stiffed for $60,000 and never paid. There was a pattern, forgive the word, in a man who made coats. A long, consistent seam of the same behavior running through 15 years and everyone who had ever trusted him. He didn't have a factory problem. He'd never had a factory problem. He had a truth problem. He built beautiful things on foundations he never intended to honor, and he had finally run out of people who hadn't learned that yet. I sat in a mill full of people the old Gerald would have called nobodies. Marisol, Dawn, 60 others. And we were the only operation in the region that could actually save him. I want to be precise about the 2 things happening at the very same time, because that contrast is the whole spine of this story. As his brand slid toward the cliff, creditors calling his cell every hour, the department store's lawyers drafting the cancellation, Vanessa long gone with someone solvent, my company was closing the best quarter in its history. While he sat in a rented office begging strangers for $900,000, I sat in a mill I owned outright, deciding whether or not to be one of those strangers. And he still didn't know my name was on the door. Priya brought me the recommendation on the merits alone. Good product, terrible management, cash crisis, she said, sliding the term sheet across. If we impose our production terms and move the ship date, it's a sound deal. If we don't, it's a bonfire. Your call. I looked at it a long time. Here's what I could have done. I could have said no and let the whole thing quietly collapse, and he would never even have known how close his salvation had been sitting. Deniable. A quiet ruin you could almost call an accident.
But that would have been a lie told with silence. And I don't lie. The deal was sound. A sound deal deserves a yes, no matter whose name is begging at the top of the page. So I did the hardest thing in the whole 12 years. Harder than the night shifts. Harder than the bathroom floor. I approved it. On the merits. And I set the meeting. A Thursday, 2 o'clock, at the Keystone offices in the Canal Street Mill. The same building where I had once folded surgical gowns for $8.15 an hour. He would come to pitch the investor and tour the manufacturer in a single visit, never guessing they were the same person. Never guessing that person was me. That night I told Emma, 16 now, all elbows and opinions and her great-grandmother's stubbornness, only that I had a hard meeting in the morning. She found me at the kitchen table, winding the watch. "You okay, Mom?" "I'm going to do my job tomorrow," I said. "That's all. Just my job."
She studied me the exact way my mother used to, over glasses she didn't wear. "Measure twice," she said, and grinned. And I understood that the steel my mother had promised had skipped clean over me and landed, whole, in my daughter. They came at 2 o'clock exactly. I stood in the glass office above the floor and watched Gerald Marsh walk into my mill. He was heavier now, grayer, and I'll give him this. He was wearing one of his own top coats, and it was beautiful. The man could always design. He walked the way he'd always walked, like the room was fortunate to receive him. He shook hands with my operations director, Marcus. He admired the machines. He told my floor manager, warmly, "Whoever runs this place clearly knows what they're doing." He did not once look up at the glass office over his head. Why would he? He was here to charm money out of strangers, the way he'd charmed it out of me for 9 years. I let him tour. I let him sit down in my conference room with his broker and his spec sheets and his good coat and his practiced, desperate smile. I let Priya start walking him through the production timeline while I watched from a doorway he couldn't see. Then I came down the stairs. I'd love to tell you I made an entrance, that there was music. There wasn't. I walked in with a folder under one arm and a cup of coffee in the other hand, set them both down, sat at the head of the table, and said, "Mr. Marsh, I'm the principal here. I understand you need a manufacturer and a bridge investment. Let's talk about your order." He knew my voice before his eyes caught up to it. I watched it land in stages. The smile first. It froze, then slid, then failed entirely. The color went next. Then 12 years arrived on his face all at once, like a tide coming in. "Ruth," he said, barely a sound. "Ruth Delaney," I said. "Yes." The room went very, very quiet. His broker glanced between us, lost. Priya went still. And this, right here, is the moment the story could have become a different kind of story. Because I had the speech. Of course I had the speech. I'd written it 1,000 times on 1,000 sleepless nights. The one where I stand up and tell him exactly what he cost me. The funeral, and the forged loan, and the bathroom floor, and my father's sigh, and then I slide the folder back across the table and tell him to burn. I had 12 years of that speech stacked behind my teeth. I didn't give one word of it. Because a long time ago, on a cold bathroom floor with a feverish child on my chest, I had promised myself I would not become him. And a promise is a seam. It either holds under load
or it isn't worth making. So instead, I opened the folder and I did my job. Out loud. Exactly the way I would have done it for a complete stranger who'd walked in off Canal Street. Your product is good, I said. And I meant it, because the fabric doesn't lie. Your coats are genuinely good. Your quality is real. That's the only reason we're having this conversation at all. He swallowed. Ruth, Your numbers, though, don't work, I went on, evenly. You've underpriced this run by 11%. You'll lose money on every coat at the number you quoted the store. Your timeline is wrong. This needs 100 days to do right, and you've promised 90, and the store won't move for you. And your personal guarantee means when this fails, not if, when, the way you've built it, you lose your house. I laid 2 documents on the table and turned them to face him. So here are your options. The same 2 I'd put in front of anyone sitting in that chair.
Option 1. My firm invests the $900,000 and manufactures the full run here in this building. But only on our production terms, in full, no edits, and only if the store moves the ship date 10 days. I already called their sourcing director this morning. She'll move it. Not for you, for us. Because when Keystone's name is on a run, they know it lands perfect and on time. Option 2, you take nothing from me. You walk out that door and you find another shop. And you already know there isn't another shop that can do this in the days you have left. He stared at the papers. His hands weren't steady. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked right down the middle. You'd fund it, build it, after everything. And here is the part I need you to hear, because it is the entire soul of the thing. This isn't about everything, Gerald, I said. This is about 1,100 coats, and whether the deal is sound. And it is sound, if you do it my way. So I'll do my job. I'd do exactly this for anyone. I didn't punish him. I didn't sabotage a single figure. And I didn't forgive him either. Not in some warm cinematic rush. I simply did the sound thing, the honest thing, the by-the-book thing, which happened to be the one thing he had never, in 15 years, done for another living soul. And somewhere in the middle of it, his gaze drifted. The way a person's eyes wander when their whole understanding of themselves is quietly coming apart. Past the term sheets, through the glass wall behind me, to the corner of my desk, to a small velvet box, open. Inside it, a scratched Timex with a cracked crystal, still ticking. My mother's watch, the one that had sat on a kitchen table 12 years before, keeping time in the silence, the moment he stepped over the threshold and told me I'd always be fine.
He recognized it. I watched him recognize it. I watched the whole thing arrive in him. That kitchen, that casserole, that sentence, that sound. He went white to the lips. I didn't say one word about the watch. I didn't have to. Some reckonings don't need a sentence. They just need the truth sitting quietly in the room, wound that morning, still keeping perfect time. He took option 1. Of course he did. It was the only sound choice on the table. And for the first time in his life, Gerald Marsh chose the sound thing, because the woman across from him had left him no room at all to lie his way past it. And we built the coats. 1,100 wool top coats, cut and tailored in the Canal Street mill by the 62 people he'd have called nobodies. Marisol on the front line, Dawn's steady hands on the finishing. We shipped every one to spec on the day we said we would. The store's reorder came in 6 weeks later. Marsh and Vale survived, and my firm made exactly the return the contract specified. Not $1 more, not $1 less. By the book, right down to the last decimal. Before the final signing, he lingered at the door, the way he had lingered at another door 12 years before. Except this time it was him who couldn't quite make himself walk through it. "I told myself you'd be fine," he said, not looking at me. "Back then. I said it so I wouldn't have to feel it. So I could go." "I know," I said. "I've known that for 12 years. Ruth, the timing. Your mother, He stopped. 12 years too late. And the man who always had the words finally couldn't find a single one. And that was the moment the door opened. Emma came in without knocking, the way she always did. 16, sure of herself. A folder of shipping documents in one hand. "Mom, the store confirmed the extension." She stopped short when she saw we had company.
She didn't know him. Why would she? She'd been 4. But Gerald knew her. He looked at this tall, unafraid girl. My mother's chin, my hands, the whole family's stubbornness written across her face. And I watched him finally do the one piece of arithmetic he had refused to do for 12 years. Exactly what he had set down beside the door and stepped over on his way out. Emma gave him a polite, blank half smile, the kind you'd give a stranger in an elevator. "Sorry, I'll come back." And she was gone. That was all. No line, no accusation. Just a daughter who didn't even recognize him, walking out without a second thought. I didn't have to say a thing. She had already delivered the only sentence that could ever land on him, being everything he threw away and thriving. I could have let him off the hook. I could have twisted the knife. I didn't either. Because I want to be honest with you about the cost. And I won't dress it up pretty. Dressing things up pretty is his trade, not mine. Winning that meeting did not give anything back. My mother never met the woman I became. She died believing she was leaving her daughter in the hands of a man who'd keep her safe. My daughter grew up watching me leave for a night shift, watching me sew until my fingers bled. And I will never get those bedtimes back. Not one of them. Not for $4.1 million or 40. My father died before he ever once said the word sorry. My brother and I speak twice a year now, politely, about the weather. None of that came back when Gerald Marsh went white at my conference table. That is not how the arithmetic of a stolen decade works. There was no reversing entry for the years. So when he stood in my doorway, holding out an apology 12 years overdue, like a coat he hoped I'd finally try on, I didn't take it. I just gave him the truest thing I had left.
"You didn't ruin me, Gerald," I said. "But don't mistake that for being forgiven. Then I went back upstairs, to my floor, to my people, to the sound of 30 machines running in time, like rain on a tin roof, to my work. Marsh and Vale is still around, in case you're wondering. So is Keystone. We even do business now and then, at arm's length, on terms that are written down and honored. That surprises people. They want the ending where I burn it all to the ground. But I never wanted his ruin. I told you at the start, I wanted my life back. And the quiet truth this whole story turns on is that I'd already built a better one long before he ever walked back through a door. He didn't return to a woman waiting for him. He walked into the middle of a life that no longer had a single empty chair with his name on it. Emma runs our design studio now. She wears her great-grandmother's watch on Fridays, cracked crystal and all. And when some nervous young designer sits across from her, praying we'll believe in them, my daughter leans in and says the thing, without even knowing where it first came from, 3 generations back, at a kitchen table. Measure twice. The fabric doesn't lie. So here's what I've learned, and I'll leave you with it. When someone tells you you'll always be fine, most of the time they are telling you they've decided to stop carrying you. Let them. Set the weight down. Then go build the kind of life where, one ordinary Tuesday, the very thing they need most turns out to be sitting quietly in your hands. And you get to choose, calmly, to be the honest person they never once were. That isn't revenge. That's just keeping time. If this story meant something to you, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.